Hearings Officer from Ecology that's going to conduct the hearing tonight. On behalf of the Department of Ecology, thank you for coming. And go on. We have a few other ecology staff here in attendance. Joanna Ekram is here. She's a planner from the Ecology Air Quality Program on the west side of the state. This is Margie Chambers. She works for the Spokane Regional Clean Air Agency. In the back, we have Karen Wood, who is the section manager for the air quality program in Spokane. And back in the door is Brooke Beeler. She's our communications manager in Spokane office. So we're here to discuss the following proposed revision to the Washington State Implementation Plan, or what we call the SIP. We're proposing to include Spokane Regional Clean Air Agency's current rule on solid fuel burning devices in the state implementation plan. So our agenda is Joanna and Margie are going to give brief presentations to explain the proposal, and then we'll open the floor for a question and answer session, and at that time staff can respond to your questions. That'll be about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll have the formal hearing where you can record your comments for the public record. So logistics, back in the corner right here are bathrooms. Emergency exits, there's one back by the bathroom, there's this front door you came in, then there's one back through the lab back there and a couple back in the back. So hopefully we won't have to partake of those. And then there are some handouts that you probably got when you came in. If you didn't, they're up front at the counter. So I will be turning this over to Joanna at first. I'd ask that you please silence your cell phones, and if you need to take a call, please step out into the hallway. And please hold down the noise and be respectful of others and their opinions. And that's about it. So we'll start with Joanna.
Okay. Thank you, Cynthia, and thank you everybody for being here tonight. I'm Joanna Ekram with Department of Ecology. And the purpose of the hearing tonight is to receive your comments on our proposed revision to the Washington State Implementation Plan. But before we get started, go through a brief presentation. Okay, so Ecology is proposing to include Spokane Regional Clean Air Agency's current rule on solid fuel burning devices in Washington SIP. Solid fuel burning devices are wood stoves, fireplaces, pellet stoves, and masonry heaters. Spokane Clean Air Agency revised their rule last year after a public comment period, and the rule went into effect in September of 2014. What is the state implementation plan? Well, it's a statewide plan for meeting national ambient air quality standards, and it describes how the state implements, maintains, and enforces these standards. EPA sets these standards for 6 common pollutants that are harmful to people's health under the authority of the Federal Clean Air Act. So the SIP includes state and local rules and programs to meet the NAAQS. It also includes air quality plans for specific areas to meet or maintain standards. And this plan must be updated periodically, either to meet federal requirements or because of changes to state and local rules or plans. And so we're revising the SIP, we're proposing to revise the SIP to replace outdated rule on solid fuel burning devices with the current rule. And this will also help reduce levels of particle pollution. Larger particles are called PM10 or particulate matter 10 microns or less, and then fine particles are called PM2.5 or particulate matter 2.5 microns or less. And this will help support the Spokane maintenance plan for PM10. In the mid-1990s, Spokane was a non-attainment area for the particulate matter standard. And that required a host of state and local actions to understand the source of the problem and implement enforceable strategies to help solve the problem. And the area was redesignated in 2005. As part of the redesignation, the area has to develop 2 10-year maintenance plans. So the first was submitted in 2005, and the second will be submitted in the next year or two. And how will this change affect stakeholders? So ecology and local air agencies already implement Washington state law, which is called the Revised Code of Washington. So this change will benefit the air agencies and wood burners from having clearer rules. So the rules will match, the current rules will be updated in the SIP. Just to give you a little bit of background about why this is important. So wood smoke is one of the main sources of air pollution in Washington in the winter months, and it emits fine particles. They're a fraction of the diameter of a human hair, and many of these particles are toxic, and most are so small that when you breathe them in, they get past your body's defenses and can even be absorbed into the bloodstream, and where they can cause damage. Certain groups are more at risk from particle pollution. These include people with existing heart or lung conditions, older adults, children, and also pregnant women. And particle pollution, actually, it causes serious harm even at levels below the federal safety standards. There's actually no level of exposure that's considered safe for people. And it's attributed to cause 1,100 premature deaths each year in Washington state and result in about $200 million in preventable costs per year. And this pollution can reach unsafe levels in the winter. It's really affected by meteorology and weather patterns. We often have stagnant air in the winter where there's not a lot of wind. We can also have temperature inversions where we have a layer of cold air which traps pollution close to the ground, and that allows the levels to build up quickly. And air pollution in many neighborhoods is unhealthy during these times. Certain types of devices emit more fine particles than others. What ecology and local air agencies, our role, we focus on providing financial assistance for people to change out their older devices to cleaner burning devices. We also have strict emission standards in place since the mid-1990s. These are for new wood stoves. And we also, on certain days when air pollution is forecasted to reach unhealthy levels that could result in a violation of air quality standards, we can restrict certain types of devices. So next I'll hand it over to Margie Chambers.
Thank you. So the purpose of the proposed SIP revision is to update the document with the current solid fuel burning device rule that is in effect right now in Spokane County. The outdated SIP has our old rules from back in 1994, and so it's time to just update those old rules with the current rules that we currently enforce. The local solid fuel burning device rule was updated in 2014 to align our local rule with the state rule for calling burn bans. The local rule update also clearly defined and added exemptions available for people to obtain when they use their solid fuel burning device during a burn ban. The purpose of the SIP revision is to update the outdated document with our current local rules. So the next two slides that I'm going to go over contain tables highlighting the proposed changes to be made to update the 1994 rules to the current 2014 rules. A detailed summary of these proposed changes are available both on Washington State Department of Ecology's website and Spokane Regional Clean Air's website. And then they're also available in handouts that were in the reception area when you guys signed in this evening. The local solid fuel burning device rules are already in effect for Spokane County. The proposed changes that we're talking about with this SIP are to update that document with the current rules. So what I'm going to do is go line by line in these next two slides. So section 8.01 is the purpose, and the changes that were made is we updated curtailment standards from PM 10, which is dust and smoke, to PM 2.5, which is looking at the smoke, to meet the state requirements and to protect public health. So in section 8.03, the definitions The changes incorporated definitions from existing state law. The definitions were either updated, removed, and/or added. And the intent of them was to clarify the solid fuel burning device regulation. In section 8.07, the curtailment section, we updated that section to align with existing state law, which included criteria to declare stage 1 and stage 2 burn bans, and solid fuel burning devices that may be used during a stage 1 burn ban. So in section 8.08, the exemption section, we updated it to clarify definitions of existing exemptions that we already had in our rules. Low income, no adequate source of heat, and temporarily inoperable. And we also added 2 new exemption types in this section. The first one was a one-time 10-day exemption, and then a state of emergency exemption. In section 8.09, the procedure to geographically limit solid fuel burning devices, we updated that content in there to reflect the redesignation for being in attainment for PM10. And then lastly, in section 8.10, restrictions on the installation of solid fuel burning devices, the edits were made to align our local regulations with state law, with existing state law. So, the SIP revision that we're talking about today helps our area, Spokane County, continue to meet federal health-based air quality standards. It does not change local solid fuel burning device rule language that is already in effect. Ecology or Spokane Clean Air are not placing any new limits on wood heating with this SIP update. It is updating the document to reflect current solid fuel burning device rules. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it back over to Joanna, who's going to wrap things up, and then we will start the question and answer session.
Well, just quickly before Joanna comes up and we start the question and answer session, I wanted to explain the difference. So during the question and answer session, you can ask questions and interact with staff, and they can answer back. And during the formal public comment period, you can ask a question for the record, but we can't answer the question during the formal comment period. So that you can ask it, and it'll be answered in the response to comments, the formalized document as a result of all these hearings and written comments. But so the interactive piece is now that any questions you ask during the formal hearing, the staff can't answer. So I just.
Are you starting the question?
I will just assume. I just wanted to make sure. We had a little confusion this morning about that, so I just wanted to make sure everyone understood the difference between when you can ask questions and get them answered and when you can ask questions and not get them answered. So I'm going to go ahead and let Joanna start the question and answer, and we'll get hands and we'll just go in order. We'll go about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll start the testimony.
Yeah, before we get started, I'd just like to let people know how you can participate. You can submit comments on this proposal through April 10th, which is next Friday. And you can submit comments either by testifying this evening or submitting written comments at tonight's public hearing. You can also email the comments to aqcomments@ecy.law.gov or mail comments to the address on the screen. And we brought some copies of the SIP revision, which are sitting outside. And you can also find it online on Ecology or Spokane Regional Clean Air Agency's website. We're accepting comments on whether or not Ecology should submit Spokane Regional Clean Air Agency's current solid fuel burning devices rule to EPA for approval on the SIP, and whether or not the proposed SIP revision is adequate to help the area continue to meet federal air quality standards. And we'll consider all of your comments and develop a response to comments. We'll send that out to everybody who submits comments, or if you put your email on the sign-in sheet, we'll also be sending that to you.
I have one person asking, they don't have email with their physical address, will they get a copy?
Sure, just let me know, and I can mail a copy.
Okay.
Okay, ready?
Sure.
Okay, Cindy Zapataki, president of Spokane Paper. I'm concerned about your changing the curtailment standards. So you're saying in 8.01, you're going to update the curtailment standards, which implies defining violations from PM10 to PM2.5, which is quite a jump. My first question is that not the highest standard in the country for PM standards? And number two, will you yourselves be levying the fines against those who refuse to comply? And secondly, will you be using law enforcement to arrest those who refuse to comply with the jump from PM10 down to PM2.5?
John, do you want me to answer, or?
If you'd like to start talking about how the 8.01, I think that was
So,
the first part of your question.
Several years ago, Washington State Department of Ecology updated their state rules, well, it was more than several years ago, to use, instead of using PM10, which is dust and smoke, to call a burn ban, they wanted to just look at smoke. And so they switched the value from looking at PM10 pollution to PM2.5 pollution. So when we use that criteria to call a burn ban, if PM2.5 levels are becoming elevated, and we don't want to violate the federal health-based standard, we're calling a burn ban on smoke pollution, not dust pollution and smoke pollution. That makes sense. And then PM2.5 better protects public health. It's,
What is that level?
so to violate the federal health-based standard, it's 35 micrograms per cubic meter of air. And so typically burn bans are called, I don't have the information right in front of me, but there's specific criteria they have to be met for stage 1 and stage 2, and I can look it up because I have it in my stack at my desk. But we call it before it gets to 35 micrograms per cubic meter of air, because once we've gotten to that, we've violated the federal health-based standards. And if you do that several times, then you could be considered a non-attainment, and then EPA comes in. And so we want to do what we can and be proactive to keep our air quality within those standards. So it's just local air quality agency working with the local people.
So Margie, I think.
But you didn't answer my question.
Yeah, her question is 2.5 PM the strictest in the nation?
It's the same across the
Is that-
country.
is that your-
Yes, the same.
Yeah,
It's a national standard.
Standard.
For counties across the nation, they've dropped it to PM 2.5. What about the 35, whatever you said?
Micrograms, that's national, so all throughout the United States, we all have to meet the national standard.
Excuse me. The PM10 is a pollutant by itself, and PM 2.5 is a pollutant by itself.
Does the law say that?
Yes,
All
it
that
does.
is a number?
No, 2.5 is the size of the particles you're looking at. The other one, PM10, is the size of the particle you're looking at.
Right.
So all the particles from 10 microns down is included in the PM10 standard. Particles only 2.5 microns and smaller are included in the PM 2.5 standard. PM 2.5 particles and down is the range that smoke from wood stoves and other industrial processes are found. PM 10 includes that, but it also includes road dust, sawdust. PM 10?
Counties have told me that road dust is not included in any of your air quality search.
Yes, it is,
No, it's not.
because I wrote it.
Yeah.
Well, that's great.
But
Your county commissioners say not.
I think there's some misunderstanding, sir. If you want to talk
And
about it.
I'd love to know that, that'd be great.
But, yeah, because we have a program in the PM10 maintenance plan where we require the county and the state and all of that to clean the roads so there's not as much road dust. We require paving and all of that.
Yay.
But But the,
What are they gonna pay my street?
well,
Let's focus
right
on
now,
that.
I'm just trying to explain that there's a difference between PM10 and 2.5, and it's not, they've both been assigned a different concentration. The concentration of PM10, you're allowed to get up to 150 micrograms per cubic meter of air. PM 2.5, because it's smaller and more impact on public health, it's only allowed to get up to 35 before it's considered to be causing a problem with public health. So that, I just wanted to explain that. It's not, it doesn't, it's really two different standards. It's not, you know, it isn't one getting more, in some ways it's a little more strict. But again, it's a standard that's the same across the nation. It's set by the EPA, and that's the number we have to meet.
Could you tell me who you are?
My name is Ron Edgar. I'm a 35-year employee of the Spokane Regional Clean Air Agency. I was chief of technical services until I retired 2.5 years ago. I'm back right now as a special project person writing the maintenance plans for PM10 and carbon monoxide.
Okay, so the other part of my question is, will the Clean Air Agency be levying the fines, and will there be arrests that you will use law enforcement for if people refuse to turn off their stoves during a very, very cold winter? Will you go into homes and will you arrest people who refuse to turn off their fireplaces and stoves in an emergency situation where it's really, really cold? Will you do that?
Well, since Spokane Regional Clean Air Agency has jurisdiction for calling burn bans and enforcement, I'll hand it over to Marty if that's okay.
So our inspection staff is not like law enforcement. We don't have the right to enter somebody's home. If a burn ban is called because air quality is really poor due to temperature inversion, and we issue a burn ban, it is communicated widely through the media, websites, burn ban, call lines, etc. And we do have inspection staff that will go drive around and look for chimneys. And they'll may knock on a door and say, hey, FYI, there is a burn ban. But our inspection staff educate first. And then if it is somebody that continually does not follow the burn bans to help protect public health, a notice of violation may be issued. And that would be very similar to a speeding infraction. It's a civil penalty, not a criminal penalty. So there is a fine associated with it. It's not a criminal go to jail.
Do you go to court?
So
Does a person
we
who
have,
gets that go to court?
because we are a environmental agency and a governmental agency, we utilize a service called the Pollution Control Hearings Board. So there's a whole mitigation process that's been set up by our board of directors that really walks people through the process. They get the notice of violation. They have 30 days to tell their side of the story in writing. Then it's assessed. There can be meetings in between that. And there's several different processes to go through. Sometimes people do go through the process of choosing to go through the Pollution Controls Hearing Board and state their case, and then that board decides. the
How much
outcome
are
of
the
that case.
fines?
Pardon
How
me?
much are the fines?
For an NOV for someone burning during a burn ban. The fines vary, but it is my understanding a typical notice of violation for using a solid fuel burning device during a burn ban starts around $200.
Starts at 200.
Now, I
So
asked
you're
you, the
still
other part of my
working.
question was, will you work with law enforcement if people refuse to come in, they're burning their stoves, you send them a fine notice, then will you go to the courts under the Constitution? Will you use law enforcement for law enforcement procedures? Will arrests be made?
So, to my understanding, we have never used law enforcement, nor is there plans to use law enforcement. It's a civil issue, not a criminal issue. And we want to work with people. That's why we always try education first, because people, the bulk of the community wants to make sure that everyone has clean air to breathe. And so if there is a burn ban, we want to work with them. Maybe they would qualify for something like it's their only source of heat is that wood stove. Well, then we have an exemption for that. Or it could be that they're low income right now, and we have an exemption for that, so they can use their wood heating device. Our intent is not to let people go out in the cold.
But you said, let me just, I don't understand this. You said civil, this is a civil penalty. Under our Constitution, whether it's civil, or whether it's a misdemeanor, or whether it's something more serious, it's all covered under our constitutional law. So you're an agency, but you're replacing the constitutional legal system, is that what you're saying you're doing? So you don't go to court, a person doesn't get due process, they don't bring their attorney in, and you as an agency are leveling a fine.
So they can. Most times things are resolved without having to go that far down the legal system. But they certainly can bring in, and sometimes people hire an attorney for their visit to the Pollution Controls Hearing Board. But I would say 90% of the time in any of the tickets that are issued, they're resolved in our office, working with these people one-on-one, because we want them to help keep our air clean. We're not out. Most people are willing to work with us and want to do the right thing.
Okay, we've got a bunch of hands up here. You had your hand up next.
I have a couple questions in lieu of you just, what you just stated. Are you saying that you have issued tickets in the past for burn bans and people not
So I'm going
honoring
to have
that?
to refer to a colleague of mine, because I am not an inspector, so I don't follow that data very heavily. Matt, could you help answer that question, please?
Yeah, we have issued notices of violation to folks for unlawfully using their wood stoves during curtailments. We don't have that many curtailments each year, but when we do have curtailments, there's two different types, stage 1 and stage 2. Stage 1 just means that only certain types of devices can still be used, and stage 2 means only those folks with exemptions can use their wood stoves. And we have about 30 to 40 people in the county that have exemptions. And we just regulate Spokane County jurisdiction. Within the county, there's a smoke control zone. I don't think we have a map of
We do.
We do have a map of it. So a lot of the more rural areas of Spokane County are outside of the smoke control zone. Thank you. So on this particular map, you'll see that the area that's, I'm going to say grayish, that's our smoke control zone. So any of these areas outside in the light green, if we call a curtailment for wood stove use, to date, in the almost 20 years I've been here, we've never called a county-wide burn ban curtailment extending county-wide. We've limited it to this thing we call the smoke control zone. So for folks that are inside this boundary, if we're in a curtailment and the inspectors are driving around and they see someone using a wood stove, generally if the emissions are very light, that's not an issue. If they're heavier, they may stop and talk to the resident if they're home and just ask, if they're using a certified device or not. Because during that first stage, that stage 1 curtailment, there are many, many devices that are totally acceptable to use. Pellet stoves, some of the newer wood stoves, some of the inserts that are out there. And if it happens to be a stage 2 curtailment, which is even more rare historically speaking, then they'll be looking at like any use of wood stoves unless they have those exemptions. But I will say that on average, we only issue about 0 to 2 notices of violation each year for wood stove use. And oftentimes it's not actually related to using a stove that's not certified, is because regardless of the stove, regardless of whether we're in a burn ban or not, the issue is really one of opacity, the amount of smoke that's coming out of the chimney. It's just, I'll use the term as barreling out. It's really heavy and thick. And as Margie explained, we typically issue folks at least one warning, sometimes multiple warnings, sometimes even seasonally we try to do a warning, but at some point we will issue a notice of violation, and folks can talk to us about the circumstances. If they don't, if it's like a first-time violation, we can basically extend the period of time that they pay the violation, maybe break it up into payments. We can also say, hey, we'll suspend a lot of that penalty if there's no recurrences within 5 years. In terms of how far the process can go, It can be mitigated, it can be appealed to the Pollution Control Hearings Board, like Margie mentioned. If the Pollution Control Hearings Board didn't rule in someone's favor and they want to take that to Superior Court, they can. Again, in the 20 years or so that I've been here, we've never had anything ever go to Superior Court. But it can go up that chain.
How
So-
spendy are we talking when you say 5 years down the road, you can get it taken off your record?
Well, it's not so much about being on the record. What we do is if let's say we assess a $200 civil penalty, we may say, hey, we'll suspend $100 of that provided there's no recurrences within 5 years. And then after 5 years, let's say for some reason there was another recurrence.
Are you supposed to sign up for these exemptions? Is that what I heard you say?
We have different types of exemptions, and Marty was talking about that just a little bit. We do have, for example, an emergency provision that was added by our board of directors just this last rule revision last year. And so if there was some sort of, let's say, ice storm, the board of directors could declare a state of emergency, and we could just issue a blanket geographically limited exemption. You wouldn't have to apply for that.
Okay.
On the other
So
hand,
another question.
oh, okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, wait, because I think it's you.
Okay.
I heard on the radio that some states are fighting this and they're not following along with it. And that the government, the federal government is going into homes and inspecting the, whatever they use to burn.
Yeah, I personally don't know anything about that. All I can say is that for Spokane County, for Spokane Regional Clean Air Agency, our inspectors do not go into homes. It's our policy. In addition, there's regulations about right of entry that we follow very specifically and we get legal advice on. Even if folks specifically say, hey, come on in my home and look at my wood stove, generally that's not something we will do. If it's more of a commercial establishment open to the public, that's different. Like a wood stove shop where they're selling the devices, we go in there and inspect those devices to make sure they meet manufacturer specifications for clean burning wood stoves.
So is the incinerator included in this?
Yeah, the incinerator is actually one of our largest types of air pollution sources that's regulated very heavily. We have a lot of standards that apply. There are actually federal standards that apply, as well as some state standards. So it is regulated very heavily.
Okay, so then how does the fact that, what is it, Department of Natural Resources or whatever, DNR, allowed a fire to keep burning instead of putting it out, and hundreds of acres was burnt, and then you come down on the homeowners, and I don't see the correlation there between the two of them.
I think those are separate, that's a whole separate.
But it's burning.
Yeah, it is. I understand your concern about that. When you talk about Department of Natural Resource, land clearing, burning, forest clearing, that is regulated in a whole different arena than what we deal with. We deal with like outdoor burning, residential fires, recreational fires, the wood stoves. So it is kind of a complicated arena of all sorts of different types of burning programs that are out there.
So we have about 10 more minutes for questions, and I know there's some other people that have hands up. So you, and then you.
Okay, your pamphlet right here that I just picked up, you produced in 2009, basically shows a graph, and the graph shows number of exceedances of the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. And since 1995, I think that's 95, there were 4, and after that, they had 0 days where we exceeded the number of days in the Spokane region. So we've met the statewide plan for meeting the National Ambient Air Quality Standards from 1995 to today. I mean, that's 20 years, and so Matt has been working for the agency for 20 years. Why are we even here if we're meeting the National Ambient Air Quality Standards? It doesn't make sense. Your pamphlet even says we have 0 days of
I know,
meeting
it's
that.
great.
So then why are we even
So why don't
having
we
this
close the
discussion?
doors and go home?
It doesn't make sense to me.
So we're here to help make sure, we're here to help make sure that you continue to meet the National Ambient Air Quality
making it work.
Standards.
Or have they been changed?
They do get stricter over time. Most recently in 2012, there's a change to the fine particulate matter annual standard.
Who made the change?
That's made by EPA, and they have an independent scientific advisory board that reviews all the peer-reviewed scientific
They can see a
information.
particle at 2.5 microns.
Well, let's let her finish, get her question answered first here, because this woman has the floor back here.
Well, I just want to know, because if your pamphlet is here, it says 2009, and this is, you know, this meeting is for the statewide plan for meeting the national ambient air quality standards, and we've met them through today.
Yes,
And it doesn't make sense to me unless EPA is lowering them or state laws are lowering them. So please explain what has happened since you printed this pamphlet of why we're even here.
So first of all, let me just make it clear that we're not making any changes to the rule language. So there's no new requirements on burning with this action. Second of all, you know, we are in attainment with the federal air quality standards, both for PM and for PM 2.5. The area is probably a little bit more at risk for the PM 2.5 standard. Even though we're in attainment, we can still have days during the winter when we have stagnant weather conditions. Just allows the air pollution to build up rather than when it's windy or wet, and the pollution can, you know, disperse more quickly. So we do still have some unhealthy days where we experience high levels of pollution. So I have this chart here that shows. So our goal here is to update the older rule in the state implementation plan. We're not making any changes to the rule, but part of that, what that will do is help us to continue to meet the federal EPA requirements.
But I'm still confused because if we're meeting the national ambient air quality standards, and then you're saying that we have days when we exceed, is it the 2.5 particulate level? What are we exceeding that has changed with the national ambient air quality standard? I don't get it,
We
sorry.
meet the standards because
It doesn't
we
make
are
sense.
enforcing it each year.
Yeah, I mean, the way that the standard is measured for PM 2.5, it's a running 3-year average of the annual 98th percentile value. So for example, if you have a full year's worth of monitoring data, that means you can have about 8 days where you exceed the standard but still meet it. So that's how the PM 2.5 standard is measured.
Thank you for explaining.
So I'm a little confused. We have current wood burning standards in Spokane Regional Clean Air, correct? I mean, and those are current. Those were changed in 2014.
Correct.
Correct. This SIP is a statewide thing, and I keep hearing people say we're not changing the rules, we're just updating them.
So,
Correct, but-
yeah, so there's a statewide clean air plan that has our clean air regulations, Puget Sound's clean air regulations, Ecology's clean air regulations. We went through the process to update our local solid fuel burning device regulations last year.
Last year.
There was public hearings and testimony and comment, and the board of directors approved it. And the next step in this 3-step process is to get input again. It allows for community input, and then Ecology updates it.
So wait a minute, let's stop right there. Update. We're using two different terms. It's English
Yeah.
language. If we're updating, we're changing, correct?
Yes, from the old
So
1994
we're taking
rules.
rules that are already, no, you changed them in 2014,
Yeah,
correct?
but the plan, this big clean air plan that has a whole bunch of different information in it. It
Nationwide.
has, nope, clean air plan, statewide.
Statewide.
Yes. It has our 1994 solid fuel burning device rules in it. It has
Okay.
old language. So what we need to do is update that plan so it has our current rules that we currently enforce.
So this is where I'm getting confused. Why aren't you in the other regions of the state that don't have current rules in place then?
They
I guess I'm
actually
missing
do,
that
like
connection.
Stevens County has current rules through Washington State Department of Ecology. Spokane County's catching up.
Well, so I guess I'm still just, I don't know, maybe I'm thick because I've heard you say 2014, we updated our rules.
The local rule, Spokane
Right.
County. Mhm.
But now you're wanting to re-update them or re-change them because what?
No,
They
we're
weren't-
not updating our rules. We're
Then-
working with
then-
ecology to make sure
It
there's
says
state
up-
clean air, yeah.
Updates to Spokane Regional Clean Air Solid Fuel Burning Devices Rule. That's a change.
It's an administrative process to make sure that ecology's plan, the state implementation plan, has our current local rules in it. Right now, it has rules that are 20 years old. And so it's just updating what we're doing here so that it is included in this big clean air plan. And then the next step after this step is to have EPA approve it.
Anytime a local or the state revises the rules that are included in the state implementation plan, we have to go through a public process and get public comment and then submit them to EPA. Then EPA will go through its own process and decide whether or not to approve those into the SIP. So it can sometimes take a while, and so that's why sometimes people have outdated rules in the SIP. And so what we're doing now is an administrative action to update those rules.
Sorry, I still don't get why we're messing with the rules that are already in place, so, here.
I just have a question,
Well,
to
hang
kind
on
of
a
follow up with him, though.
Well,
What he-
this gentleman has a
Okay, I
story.
understand.
So, not to answer your question, but I spent the last 2 days mulling this whole thing over. And so what it is, it's already done. What we did in 2014 is done. Now they're going to package it inside the state ruling. That's what's missing.
Just changing the reading.
They're just changing the reading of those laws. But the issues that we have here to understand is clearly is that our regulations now are based upon the stuff I read and this chart. We are literally 300% more stringent now than we were before 2014. Is that correct? Correct. We went from 2.5.
No, that
No.
has nothing to do,
Well, we took the particulate size down, so we've taken dust and other things out of the equation for the healthful benefits.
Different measurements.
But what I'm-
it's really just a different pollutant.
It's smaller.
It's small.
Okay, so you have to have better burning fireplaces. That's the issue there. Okay?
Yeah.
And then when we go into a stage 1 burn ban, that's only 24 hours long. So if we have that stagnation continue, we get into stage 2, then technically we're all required to turn it off unless nobody looks and sees what's going on. That live out here in the heat with wood. That's the technicality of that law.
What I will tell you is that under the old rule, if the road out there is making 65 micrograms of dust, and your wood stove is.
We're gonna be best friends.
If it's
23% of Spokane's roads are dirt.
Yeah.
in the county, yes.
Yes.
But if we actually, if we see, in the old rule, if we saw a number approaching 65 on the PM10 monitor, we could call the wood stove ban. And it might not be wood stove that's even causing the problem. It might just be the dirt roads. We're using PM 2.5, we look at 35. Now, that's because the national standard for PM 2.5 is 35. When we start looking at numbers that are approaching 35, 20, 25, something like that, then we start thinking, okay, if the weather conditions are such that it's going to continue to build, we will call it a wood stove ban, but it will be because of wood stoves or other combustion products.
So that really is, that's really a good summary of what the big issue is. It's already law, and it's national. So Chicago has to live under those same standards as we do, which is crazy, but that's federal
Not
law for
state,
us, okay?
national.
The other part of this that really struck out for me that we need to be aware of is that that the Clean Air Act requires the EPA to revisit this NAC every 5 years. So even though we're here and talking about it now, and we've got our wood stoves down to where, we really shouldn't see anything coming out of the stack after they've been burning for 20 minutes, or when we rekindle them after 6 minutes. The issue is here is that if the EPA, as a governmental authority over this country, says we now want them to be 1.5, it's a done deal, and yes, they do have enforcement built into this law. It's very clear that the sheriff's department, police departments, any other law enforcement agency, including your agency, can do whatever they need to do to stop the burning. So that, I know that that's a concern of a lot of people. I don't know whether it happened. You guys don't, you're not bad guys. I can tell that looking at you and talking to you. We're all here in Spokane. But what we're worried about is this big federal creep that's happening all across our country. And we see it everywhere.
So would you reserve that comment for public testimony? So we can get a couple more.
Want to say it twice?
Yes. I'm gonna test your.
Put it on the record.
So you had a
We'll have to
question,
see
then
it.
I'll take your
You can have
question,
it.
and then everyone can get up and have their chance to speak. So you had
There
a
is a
question?
technical mistake in here in verbiage.
Okay, is that your
When-
question?
My question is, do they know the difference between a micrometer and a micron? And do anybody here know how big a micron is?
That's, I'm a water quality girl, I'm just curious. So you're gonna ask that someone way smarter than me.
Huh?
1 million is what a meter.
Yeah, 1 millionth of a meter is a micron, yes. You can run a 5 micron particle through your car and through the oil in your engine, and it won't hurt anything, but if you run a 6 micron, it'll destroy the engine. It's that small. Then the thing is, a micrometer is a measuring device, and there's no way on earth you can measure 1 millionth of a meter on a micrometer.
We measure it with filters, and so,
And a properly burning certified wood stove, if you're standing 6 inches from the end of that chimney, you cannot see anything coming up, and if you put your hand over it 1 inch above the edge, you will feel only warm air, not even hot.
yeah, that's part of what
And-
makes these particles so dangerous, is that they're so small and you can ingest them deeply into your lungs, so that's part of the risk with fine particles.
So, did you?
But what he's
did you
saying
get
is,
your
the wood
question
stoves are
answered?
much cleaner, and you're right, but that's why there is a stage 1 and a stage 2. If you have a clean burning stove, you get the
Okay,
contaminated.
then I have a question on that. If it's 20 below zero, which we haven't seen lately, but I have seen 48 below zero in this town. And if the power goes out, there's an awful lot of people gonna die. And you can't, you burn with something you don't have. And this is one of the things that the people who have solid burning devices, whether they be wood stoves, coal stoves, or what, when the power's out, you've got no heat. And that, in this west, that's deadly. Back east, it's deadly. But the people who write these rules are a bunch of people who are, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to use those terms.
If the power goes out, sir, it's always been our policy, you can burn.
Not if you don't have a stove.
Well, if you don't have a stove, no.
That's the problem. I'm the only one on the block that I know that might have one.
You're in the
That is a personal choice.
Yeah, lock your door. So this woman has a question, and I'm gonna close the question. Okay, so I'll take yours and yours, and then we're gonna start the public hearing, because I'm sure everybody would like to get home at some point tonight. I know I would.
Okay, I put my stove in about 2005, and it was EPA certified stove and inspected by the city and all this stuff. Has anything changed to where I have to have a higher standard?
No.
If you replace it, you'd have to have a washing and
If you put in a new one, you would have to buy one that is approved by the state of Washington. But
It
the
was
one you've got in there,
approved
as
then.
long as it, I think it's Oregon Stage 2 or better, it's good. And we consider it a certified stove, and it can be burned under
you
stage
just
1.
don't lose it. Burn it up.
So I apologize, it's the peripheral, so your question is?
Yes, I know how to find the RCW and the wax, but I can't find, I don't know how to find the rules that you have adopted locally, the SRCCAA rules. How do I find those rules?
So, do you have access to the internet?
I do.
Okay, so, oh. Thank you. So, let me escape. Okay. I should. Okay, so just open up your web browser.
Just look.
And I'm going to type this in so you can see the process. But the address is www.SpokaneCleanAir.org. And then under About Us, you go to Regulations and Fees. And it does a nice job talking about the different regulations and what they cover, and you want to look for number 8, solid fuel burning device standard. And it creates a PDF that should be able to be printed out on any printer, or you can save it and not waste paper, and save it on your computer and look at it as a digital file. And it goes through all these different sections that I talked about. So the purpose, applicability, I didn't talk about that because it didn't change. Definitions. There's lots of definitions to make sure everyone clearly understands what the expectations are. Emission performance standards, those did not change from rule. And then opacity standards, which is also a Washington state requirement on the opacity standards. Prohibited types of fuel. Then the curtailment, which is what a lot of you guys are interested in. And it explains what a stage 1 burn ban is, and what can be used, and what a stage 2 burn ban is, and the issuing processes.
And these are unique to Spokane County, these rules?
Pardon me, I
They're
didn't.
unique to Spokane County, these rules?
Probably
No.
specific, not unique. Specific,
They're,
but not
they're
unique.
specific to Spokane County, but they're not unique because most of what we did in our 2014 update process was align our local rules with existing state rules. The only difference is exemptions. We added more exemptions than what the state has. So the state has the low income, the no adequate source of heat, the primary heating source is temporarily inoperable. We added state of emergency, so think ice storm. And then where's my one-time 10-day? It's there it is. And a one-time 10-day, because what people have stated is that, oh man, my furnace just broke and we have this horrible temperature inversion. They call us and go, tell us what's going on, and they get their one-time 10-day. And then we go to section 8.9, that talks about that smoke control zone that Matt spoke about a little bit earlier. And then section 8.10 was updated to meet state law. So, available on our website. Does that help?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just a point of clarification, in this package here, that we picked up front, this is what you just pulled up on the web, which is this,
Yes,
the
yes.
county, what the county passed in 2014.
Correct.
Okay, now this one that's in strikeout, I'm assuming what that is what's currently in the state SIP,
You are correct, yes.
and it's been marked up to reflect the changes.
The changes,
I-
yes.
Okay.
Wonderful, thank you.
So give me just a minute to switch this stuff over and we'll get going with that.
Hey, Matt, can you tell us how much state food is that?
I have a slide for that.
Yes.
I put it in the presentation and haven't had a chance to use it. So let me get back to that PowerPoint and here, I'm just gonna go through these slides and scan through. So, okay, so we have history since 1988, and what this shows is the number of days, and then the year, and then the periwinkle-ish color is stage 1 burn bans, and then this purplish color is stage 2 burn bans. What is missing from this chart is 2014. Last November, we had big air stagnation, and we had 6 days in the stage 1, so the periwinkle color. So I think I looked at an average, and I think it all averages out over the entire, since 1988, I think it averaged out 6 to 7 days. And it's really hit and miss. We had some great weather in 2008 through 2010. So a lot of times it's really dependent on the weather systems that hit our region and if they allow for the dispersion of pollution, or if that cold, dense air traps the pollution.
Where would
Does
we
that
get
show-
that presentation that you guys just put on there? I mean, I see all these slides, where would you get that PowerPoint?
Oh, can we put this PowerPoint on our websites? Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
So on Spokane Clean Air right now, under hearings and notices, which is kind of on the right-hand side of the home page, there's a link to the most recent board meeting, which was today, and then this SIP proposal and the 2 public hearings. You can click on that, and we will update it and upload this PowerPoint and put it there.
Can you put that smoke ban area, the geographic
The smoke
area?
control zone?
Yeah, the control
Certainly.
zone. And the only question I have is, what determined that control zone?
The SIP outlined it.
The what?
That was stuff I wrote.
I'm sorry.
What you are looking at is essentially, we're trying to surround the urban density area, plus we're looking at the drainage basins for Latop Creeks, Little Spokane River, and Spokane River. Essentially, when it's stagnant, cold air tends to drain toward the bottom of the valley. So what we wanted to do was catch the majority of the possible wood stove sources that would be draining down into the central part of the valley, because that's where most of the buildup will be. The outer edges, of course, are not going to have the concentrations that we'll see in the central part of the Spokane Valley. So that, so we run up down 395 and 2, kind of covering the Little Spokane River drainage basin, a little bit down toward the south, and then of course out into the valley. Also, there's a tendency for smoke to gather in around lakes and other cold spots that are found in the area. So that is the reasoning behind that boundary. And then it's defined by what we, essentially township sections and ranges so that people can identify where they are.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's start the formal portion of the proceedings. This is the public comment period, formal testimony where you can come up and give your testimony for the record. So we're starting this right at 7 o'clock and it's April 2nd. And we're at the Spokane Regional Clean Air Agency in their conference room at 3104 East Augusta Avenue in Spokane. So in addition to this hearing, email notices were sent to about 1,800 interested people. There was a news release in the Spokesman on March 2nd, and there were about 6 different Twitter notifications sent to about nearly 500 followers. And then the SRCA also distributed outreach materials to people on their listservs as well. So I will be calling people to come up and testify based on the order your name appears in the sign-in sheet. And once I've called through everybody who signed up and indicated they wanted to testify, then I'll open it up for anyone who just thinks they want to and didn't sign up. And so, and if you put your name on as a yes and you change your mind, fine. If you put a question mark and you want to change that to a yes, then you can just tell me when I call your name. So when I call your name, please come up here, state your name and address for the record, and speak clearly so we can get a good recording. Since we're recording, I ask that everybody be respectful and listen to the comments and be quiet so we can get a good, clear recording for the record and so that we can respond to the comments. And because we have quite a few people that want to testify, I'm going to limit people's testimony to 3 minutes each. Ms. Beeler here will keep track of that, and she'll let you know when you're down to your last 30 seconds. If you have additional comments that you don't get to read into the record here, you can submit them in writing. They receive equal weight as a spoken comment. So the first person I have on my list is Dan Clark. Is that you?
Now, you speak here, you said?
Right up here.
I'm Dan Park, Spokane resident for about 64 years. And I wish to say I object to this because I think what you're doing is you're addressing a problem that doesn't exist. I think this was taken care of about 20 years ago. I haven't noticed any real pollution, and I think I would have noticed it. You talk about the farming, road dust being kicked up and being part of the problem. Perhaps at times it is, but I don't know if you could avoid that. A larger issue here is that I see this as being a situation of mission creep. I think that the Department of Ecology and the Environmental Protection Agency was created to address industrial problems like the Pittsburgh steel mills, Love Canal, perhaps Hanford area, and now here they are creeping into Spokane regional boards where they now want to abandon the industrial sites and come into our homes and look at our wood stove. And that's just a little bit too much. You know, I think we should all be very concerned with that. It's for one thing, we're paying taxes for this. So that's what I have to say, and again, I object to this. And thank you for your efforts. I'm sure you mean well, but I think you're misdirected.
The next person I have that indicated they'd like to testify is John Charleston. Did I pronounce that right?
Thank you. I saw that 30-second sign and I thought, I'll never get that done. So, as I was saying earlier, I find this really to be an interesting rule. It does show exactly, you know, what Dan was talking about. We're treated, like I said earlier, just like Chicago. This, you know, is a national thing. It's nice to know that I live in the green area, but you know, that could change. All of this can change. And the part that really got me, it was stunning to me, was the different size of the particulate matter. Maybe over a beer I could really understand it, but I don't quite now. But 2.5 from 10 is a big change. It is a big change. The other thing that concerns me, of course, is the burn ban. 24 hours on the burn ban. We had the chart up there. There was one time when about 10 days in burn zone 2. I would be cold for 10 days. You know, if I had to do that. I don't think that that's right. And I don't think that, you know, when we get to that sense of it, the 2.5 and we're going to have to turn off the heat, I don't know. If we've had it for decades at 10 and over, so why all of a sudden is that thing? And then I do understand that the agency can deem it to be an emergency and blow off the rules. So that's all good. I get that part. Then the other part that really concerns me is that by federal law, the Clean Air Act requires the EPA to revisit these rules every 5 years. So it's you know, to me, I'm studying necessarily coming down here, my gosh, here it is. This is a perfect example of how we expand government and then we create jobs. I read the information about the filters. I went through the rules and looked at all the plans because I was amazed, I was stunned. I know how much that costs to produce those drawings, just even that. I mean, it's like, this is just huge. And all of, you know, and not to be off of this, but this is really, I'm going to find out. I didn't call Karen Screwed up in Pend Oreille, but she was telling me last week, she says, you know, what our population in Pend Oreille County, that 57% of the population are government employees. 57%. In an area that used to have their main income came from the forestry industry, which is down now to 1.5% of their thing. So this kind of stuff, I just, you know, where's it going to end? That's my concern. Keep us healthy, I get that part too.
Thank you. So the next two people I've got, so it's Cindy and Gloria, but there was arrows and then they were crossed out. So are you Cindy? Okay, thank you. I didn't want to cause any conflict there.
I'm Cindy Zapataki. I'm president of the Spokane Citizens Alliance for Property Rights.
Can you please state your address too?
1728 East Rockwood Boulevard, Spokane, Washington, 99203. The Citizens Alliance for Property Rights, CAPER, would like to comment on your proposed rules for managing wooden pellet stoves. CAPER is made up of 15 chapters and 3 affiliates in Washington State. We represent thousands of people, plus 5 chapters in California. The Spokane chapter of CAPER is very concerned about the trend that the Department of Ecology and the Environmental Protection Agency are taking against private property owners who use wood to heat their houses and businesses. CAPER does not think the board of SRCAA should adopt EPA's overzealous air quality directives for the following reasons. Number 1, costs of new wood stoves will increase. Spokane residents who use wood to heat their homes will experience financial hardships if SCRAPA adopts EPA's newly proposed federal rules for wood stoves. Washington State already has cleaner air standards than EPA, but EPA's 5-year Clean Air Dream scheme would lower the stove emissions allowed from 4.5 grams of particulate per hour this year to 2.5 grams per hour by 2020. Wood stoves have come a long way since the 70s and 80s when they emitted 65 grams of particulates per hour. In order to achieve the 2.5 grams per hour that EPA wants by 2020, manufacturers will need to design stoves which could more than double the cost of wood-burning appliances. Number 2, burn bans will increase. New state rules for burn bans in 2012, Washington State Wood Stove Bill SHB 2326, are being implemented this year. As a result, thresholds for determining when DOE or air agencies may call bans have gone from 35 micrograms to 30 micrograms per cubic meter. This will lead to more burn bans in Spokane, since a chart reviewed by us showed that Spokane did not go below the 35 limit with burn bans very often in the past few years. But if the threshold is lowered to 30, more burn bans will be called. Just as Avista is raising rates to update their system, more and more Spokane residents will look to wood heat to supplement their heating bills. Number 3, wood is a renewable resource. Firewood is plentiful in the Spokane region and it's cheap. Forests stay healthier and are less prone to forest fires if dead trees are thinned for firewood. We support this process. Finally, fines and financial hardship will increase, and we hate to see this agency, this unelected agency, going into law enforcement. We all want clean air, but won't accept cold homes. Don't impose EPA's emissions scheme, which the National Federation of Independent Business says could eventually end the burning of wood for heat in America. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next person on my list is Gloria Clark.
3 years ago, I got a call.
Can you state your name and address for the record?
Gloria Clark, Spokane County. I wrote my address down here. 3 years ago, I got a call from a gal, Sharon Hannock, Research Mom, and she told us about a bill, Substitute House Bill 2326. She called it the Wood Stove Bill. It passed. The governor signed it. The purpose of this bill was that Pierce County was not meeting their wood stove quality. They were in non-compliance, or I guess you call it non-attainment. Okay, that's the terminology. So this bill was basically written because the people over there were freaking out because they didn't want the EPA to dictate to them what they're supposed to do in their county. So foolishly, the Democrats and Republicans, some of them, got together and passed this bill. Now I'm going to read a little bit from this bill that especially alarms me. Number 1, it does lower the particulates from 35 down to 30, which is alarming because your website shows that we have actually stayed below the 35, but let me tell you, we haven't stayed below the 30. We're going to have more burn bans, according to what SCRAPA shows right here, in my opinion. Anyway, in the law, I want to tell you on page, it's not written on pages, but it says, if the area is designated as a non-attainment area as of January 1st, 2015, or required by the EPA, the local air pollution control authority or the department, that's DOE, may prohibit the use of uncertified devices. Then you might ask, well, what does that mean? Well, I'll tell you what it means. Prohibit the use or prohibition may include requiring disclosure of an uncertified device, removal, or rendering inoperable as may be approved by rule by a local air pollution control authority or the department, that's DOE. The effective date of this rule may not be prior to January 1st, 2015. I have a feeling that's why this meeting is now and wasn't before January 1st of 2015. Obama rendered inoperable many of the cars. We gave my son-in-law a car, a Subaru, that has 300,000 miles on it. He's still using it because it was a pretty good car. And so basically, you guys do have the authority according to this law, correct? To render inoperable. So what does that mean? That means that basically, if you exceed these standards, you're not going to be able to use your wood stove. I think people need to read this bill. Be sure to look, 2012, look that up, substitute House Bill 2326, 62nd legislature. I think everybody needs to be very alarmed. I've used I know how to do it. You better it better be dry. You better put them in vertically so they don't fall out. I mean, we live with wood heat, and I'm not gonna give it up. And I just think it's just outrageous, and it is EPA approved, and that should be good enough. It shouldn't be lowered anymore. We had to move out of a neighborhood because it was so polluted back in the 70s. Let me tell you, it's not that way in Spokane anymore. Thank you.
Steve Dunham?
What do you want? Steve Dunham, 1616 South Milton, Spokane. Well, I just wanted to go back to a couple basic things. The EPA to start with. The EPA was put through in the Nixon administration in the 1970s, but it was never done constitutionally. Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution has lists enumerated powers that Congress can dictate what they can do. There's nothing about environmental protection. So the federal government, according to Article 1, Section 8, what the EPA is doing is totally illegal, according to the U.S. Constitution. It's totally a rogue agency. It's totally, and we all know in this room, it's totally out of control. I'm a building contractor that's been put out of work by the EPA because of their lead paint directives. So you are enforcing federal EPA standards that are illegal. That's something you should consider. I believe, and most of the people in this room believe, that this whole thing is all about control, regulation, taxation, and standards based on very questionable and subjective science. One of you stated earlier, which I thought was very interesting, you have the 35 micrograms per cubic meter. And I was reading in other articles that some areas in the country, and I must be wrong because you said that's the national standard, they were lowering it from 15 to 12 micrograms. But one of you stated tonight that no level is safe. So, and I totally agree with that's what the EPA would say, no level is safe. So I assume that means that over time, this 35 is going to go to 30 to 25 to 20, to whatever it takes to get total control over us as individual citizens. Just one other comment, since I was doing a little research on this. You did mention the Clean Air Act of, was it 2008? When the EPA classified CO2, which is human breath, a pollutant under Section 202 of the Clean Air Act. I think the EPA has to be reined in just a little bit, and in my opinion, totally eliminated, because it is unconstitutional and it's illegal. Thank you. Can I make just one more comment?
I think your minutes are up. But you're welcome to submit written comments. Thank you. Dennis, I'm sorry if I butchered your name, Paradis?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to ask one question, though, really.
Well, so during formal testimony, you can ask it into the record, and it'll get answered in the response.
Okay, my name's Dennis Paradis, 15921 North Forker Road, and I live in the green zone. But my question is, where are they doing these measurements for air quality to determine that, you know, most of the time we burn our stove, it's pretty darn clean, and if there's a problem, we shut it off. And I wonder if they're doing these these tests in Spokane, in the city, and what's happening, I like that, I thought about that. And I also agree that your organization is pretty much infringing on our rights way too much. And we don't care about it, but that's my opinion.
Thank you. And Gary Cummins?
My name's Gary Cummins. I live at 3520 East Hastings Avenue in Meade. And I think these regulations that we're taking and accepting from the EPA, first of all, they're a bunch of bureaucrats that live in DC that haven't the foggiest idea of what real life is about. Because they, somebody mentioned Chicago, there is, in the United States, there's 146 different boutique blends of gasoline for cars. And 46 of them are in the city of Chicago. Now, that makes good sense. But the thing about it is this: if you've got a good stove and it's burning properly, you can't see anything coming out of the chimney. Nothing. Even if you're standing inches from it, you can't see it. And they're going to measure the particles that are coming out of there at 1/1,000,000th of a meter. 39¼ inches is a meter. And you're going to measure 1/1,000,000th of that how?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how? But the thing about it is this. Now, us dummies who don't have a college education, and that's most of us, are not near as stupid as they think we are. But the thing about it is that makes me angry is this. You accept Chicago, or I should say you accept Seattle, you accept California air standards, because that's where the EPA gets theirs, without even questioning the fact that there's no science on that at all. And that's easy to prove. EPA tested when they first started out on car emissions. They had one Model Ford that failed every time. And finally they measured the ambient air, and it was 4 times dirtier than what was coming out the exhaust pipe. So the thing about it is this: the science that they're using leaves a little bit to be desired. And me personally, the power goes out, my wood stove gets lit. But if you haven't got one, you're going to get cold. And that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Let's see, I have Jean, is it Vin with a question mark?
Yeah, Wall Street.
Okay.
My name is Gene Vin. I'm from the Spokane Valley. The address is in the paper there. I got a couple of questions, one of which the limit, the PM to 2.5, is proposed to from 10 to 2.5. My question is, first of all, how do they come up with that limit? Second of all, if in a common sense reality, if there is no problem, then why try to fix something? For instance, if we are at PM10 and we don't really have that many bands, why try to redefine something to make it even more specific, which technically should not produce more bands? But on the other hand, if we're seeing the micrograms per from 35 to 30, that will obviously produce more bands. And if this agency already knows that by proving charts and graphs of a historical record, then why create something and impose a tax and fines on the public if you guys have a historical record that shows will produce more of these bands? And to build on top of what Steve and a few others were saying, going back to the EPA, we're basically putting ourselves giving ourselves up
into a national control, to an agency that is illegally operating. And my request, as a new generation coming up, to the parents and to the grandparents is, please review our history, please review the world's history. We are following the same path that leads to destruction. And if we don't accept responsibility and step up to the plate, but willingly give ourselves up into government just because we get paid by them, then we should really question our existence on this planet, in this state, just as a human being, as a common morality. Why are we here? To impose taxes and fines upon our neighbors and our citizens? We are the same type of people as you. We're trying to make a living, and there is no point to create something more stringent just to please some of the bureaucracies who do not understand the low-level lifestyle, if you want to put it that way, that most of us are living. Thank you.
So I'd like to remind the audience, while I appreciate your enthusiasm, this is a formal public hearing and not a pep rally, so if you hold your applause and your, whatever else you're doing until the end, when you can pat yourselves on the back and talk amongst yourselves, that would be appreciated. Marilyn Montgomery.
I just wanted to say, my name is Marilyn Montgomery, 4715 East Summit Drive, Spokane, Washington, 99223. I've been hearing draconian things, like we have to board up our fireplaces, we can't have barbecues anymore, heaven knows what else there might be, but this is such an infringement. And again, they say you are illegally operating. You're not very sweet people and intelligent, but nevertheless, you perhaps are operating against the Constitution. And to try to take away the modest amenities of our life, like barbecues and like fireplaces, and board them up inside our homes, I don't know if that's true, so I want to hear back from you whether or not that is so. But it's most ridiculous and a great infringement on our freedoms and our love of our homes and our lifestyles. Thank you.
The next name I have is Sherry Barnett with a question mark.
It's fine. They're speaking for me.
Okay. Then I have Jeff Broadhead.
Jeff Broadhead, 9711 East Mission, Spokane Valley, 99206. I basically believe that natural law supersedes constitutional law because that's where all the authority came from for the Constitution. And I'd like to know, do the SRCAA employees swear an oath of office to uphold the Constitution? Also, what is the constitutional line of authority regarding the EPA, the state agencies, the local agencies? Where does all that authority come from? All the way back to the state and the national and the general Constitution. Third, the Department of Natural Resources is known to mismanage public lands, which has led to fires with massive amounts of smoke coming through the Spokane area. And the federal government is even worse at managing their lands, the public lands. Next is, without getting into details, nanoparticles are much smaller than these 2.5 micron smoke particles that we're talking about, and they're being distributed over the whole area. I have photos showing massive amounts of that being spewed, and we have there's no public comment. I contacted certain powers and they blocked me from any communication. I'm not happy about that, but I think if 2.5 micron size particles are dangerous to our lungs, then certainly things that are nano-sized are going to be even worse. The federal government doesn't have our health in mind, we can tell by how they side with big pharma and you know, the Monsanto and the whole gang. They have nothing. There's no interest at all in our health. They're interested in power. And the last thing is, with all the dollars spent on regulating, why not come up with something such as electrostatic scrubbers for wood stoves that are affordable? I mean, we have electrostatic air filters in houses, cleanable scrubbers that can go on your chimney. Seem to make a lot of sense. Thank you.
Mary Ellen Albertson.
I want to thank you guys for your time, and I ditto what everybody else said, and I'm ashamed of you, sir, from coming out of retirement to put this upon us. I would like to call on Patrick Henry back in March 23, 1775, and he was at that time working on declaring independence, calling upon his countrymen to trust in God whether they want to be independent or not. He says, "Sir, we shall not fight our battles alone. There is a just God who presides over the destiny of our nation, and who will rise up friends to fight our battles for us. The battle, sir, is not for the strong alone, or is it for the vigilant, or the active, or the brave?" Now listen to his passion in the conclusion. "Is life so dear, ma'am? Or peace so sweet as to purchase at the price of chains and slavery?" And that's what you're doing to us, trying to take away the wood stoves. And I would like to call your attention to the skies. I took pictures of the jet streams out there in the skies, and people tried to tell me that's because they have to let the gas out. Bull. When you see the airplanes fly in the opposite direction and all this stuff spewing out from behind the airplanes, why are you not concerned about that? Did you come in here with an air mask on today? Because what I hear in that is more dangerous than what comes out of our chimneys. And you need to pay attention to that, because it's not only endangering my life, and even though you guys get the money to do this to us, you know what they say, when they come after one person and no one stands up for them, so what? But when it gets down to they're coming after you, because they will come after you guys also, who's going to be left to stand for you? You need to stand up for us and not bow down to what Obama is trying to put upon us. And let us have our freedom. And if it's just liberty to have a fireplace, then why not let us have our fireplace? And I understand that, oh, we can sign up and say we're poor, so please allow us to burn. Even though you say it's not national, it is national. And even though you say people aren't going to come in and inspect your houses, I heard they are. So pay attention and give yourself a break and figure out what it is in the sky that's damaging us. Without history, the nation falls apart. And with the crap they're spraying in the sky, you're not going to remember history. Thank you.
Julian Hale.
Julian Hale, 3912 East Oregon Road in Elk. So first I just want to say, some of these rules really actually make a lot of sense. Tracking 2.5 micron particles rather than 10 to track wood smoke instead of road dust. Makes a lot of sense. My concern here is that there has been a general, over time, sort of a ratcheting process, where it's always turning in the direction of less and less ability for people to, in this particular case, it would be heating with wood stoves. I really appreciate that the Spokane Regional Clean Air Agency's policy is to not use law enforcement, is to not go into people's homes, is to not do any particular kind of enforcement beyond, say, writing a ticket. But I also recognize that that while that may have been the past policy and the current policy, that may not continue on into the future, and that the rules that are being put into place do potentially allow for a lot more enforcement than currently goes on. And so we don't want to put rules in place that create the possibility of future law enforcement action or disabling of people's heating sources or what have you. So that's my big concern with the rules that are going in here, is that it enables future action that, even though it's not something that's taking place right now, we don't know who will be running the Clean Air Agency in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. And so that's why people are here and concerned about the rules that are being put into place, because we don't know what future administrations will have in store for us. So, thank you.
Thank you. Jim Robinson?
My name is Jim Robinson, 7721 North Campbell Road in the Valley. I'm here to voice my strong opposition to the proposal to tighten restrictions on solid fuel combustion devices, that is, wood stoves. Due to timing restrictions, I will only share a couple of my concerns. I've resided in the Spokane Valley for almost 50 years, and much has changed during that time. I recall the daily commute to Spokane, during which I recall observing an almost perennial haze over Spokane Valley. During that same time, the haze disappeared, wood stove technology as well as automobile technology has taken a quantum leap in efficiency. The number of burn bans has dwindled also from the bad old days, and with the exception of geoengineering contractors crisscrossing our skies with plumes of who knows what, our air in Spokane County is remarkably clean and clear. To give you an idea of the proportion of the amount of pollution in general that man contributes in relation to all other sources, we can look at the amount of CO2 contributed by Homo sapiens. With a concentration of CO2 in the Earth's atmosphere just a little under 400 parts per million, that means that about 0.04% of the Earth's atmosphere is carbon dioxide. Put another way, if the entire atmosphere was represented by $10,000, the amount of CO2 would only be 40 cents. Of all the greenhouse gases, water vapor accounts for 98%, with CO2 in second place at about 1.5 to 1.8%. Taken from figures posted by the U.S. Department of Energy in October of 2000, man's activities at that time account for about 3.2% of all greenhouse gas emissions, ignoring rather the water vapor, which takes up most of it. The amount, therefore, of CO2 attributable to man is only about 1 penny out of that $10,000. In terms of concentration of the entire atmosphere, it would be about 1 penny out of $1 million. If levels established in 1994 were deemed acceptable at that time, then why is it necessary to ratchet up these draconian regulations, especially considering how much cleaner the air and water is today compared to 20 years ago? Why is it that we need to unnecessarily impose even greater hardships upon those who struggle to make ends meet when the government calls a working poor, when our skies are clear? With most of the wood stove prices between $3,000 and $5,000 these days, most of those folks have been priced out of the market and don't have a wood stove in case we get a 30 below zero day. Trained as a chemist in the 60s, I learned that carbon dioxide was a key compound in the carbon cycle and was referred to then as a gas of life, not a pollutant as the EPA does today. In terms of particulates, Spokane is downwind from millions of agricultural acres that routinely share tons of particulates called dust, accounting for much of the allergy and asthma reactions in Spokane County. These regulations sound to me like a solution in a desperate search of a problem. Tyranny always comes riding in on a white horse wearing a smiley face. This is tyranny. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that did not sign up that would like to testify? No? Okay, so these comments will be incorporated and I will transcribe them and give them to Joanna. So they'll be incorporated along with any written comments you'd like to send Ecology. Written comments are due by April 10th, and that means due means postmarked by April 10th. And those should go to Joanna Eckram at the Department of Ecology Air Program. Her address was on the screen. If you didn't get that, I've got it up here. You've got
It's in this too.
Is it on the focus sheet?
It's right here.
Okay, great, thank you. So all the testimony received at this hearing, along with all written comments, postmarked no later than April 10th, will be part of the official hearing record for this proposal. Ecology will send a notice about the response to comments, publication to everyone that provided written comments or oral testimony on this SIP proposal and submitted contact information. Everyone that signed in for today's hearing that provided an email address, and other interested parties on agency mailing lists for this proposal. So the response to comments will among other things, contain the agency's response to questions and issues of concerns that were submitted during the public comment period. If you would like to receive a copy but did not give us your contact information, please let one of our ecology staff at this hearing know, or contact Joanna at the contact information provided for submitting comments. The next step after we receive comments and the comment period closes is to review the comments and make a determination whether to adopt the SIP revision. Ecology Director Maya Bellin will consider the SIP documentation and staff recommendations, and she'll make a decision about adopting the proposal. Ecology will then submit the proposed SIP revision to EPA for adoption. The EPA will then accept public comment before making a decision to approve the SIP revision. If we can be of further help to you, please don't hesitate to ask. You can call Joanna if you have other questions. On behalf of the Department of Ecology, thank you for coming. I appreciate your cooperation and courtesy and your time away from your families and dinner and everything else to be here tonight to give us your opinions. And so I'll let the record show this hearing is adjourned at 7:41. Thank you, everybody.